Thank you very much, Sue. President of the Barbados Hotel and Tourism Association, and all dignitaries, which is each and every one of you here. Today is a first. I have been in Barbados's public affairs since 1989, and this is the first time I've ever had the pleasure of being able to speak, believe it or not, to hoteliers and tourism practitioners in literally 24 years. And in that tells the tale that tourism has been our business, but it has not been our focus. And I say so because individually, most of this room I've had conversations with. And in most of this room, the message is the same. It is virtually in unison. And I, over the last 2 days, thought, what really can be said to hoteliers? Everybody has come here already and has spoken to you about product refurbishment and redevelopment, marketing issues, blockages within the bureaucratic structure, which is acutely felt by you but suffered by all. Airlift capacity dwindling, the horror story of what will happen when St. Vincent Airport opens and you have reduced airlift demand, even beyond that which exists now. I can cite them all. But I know that you have things to go and do, and that might take me the better part of this entire afternoon. And I equally know that what I've come to talk about is a tourism turnaround and turning imagination into reality. But where we stand today seems more like a horror story that has been just beyond your imagination. Anyone who may recall the pen of Peter Morgan, or who may recall the sight of Sir Harold St. John walking up and down the South Coast, might suggest that were they here, their language might even be stronger than any I would want to use today in respect of this horror story. And my colleague, Mr. Lynch, is here, and he bends your ears enough as to what the horror story is. But suffice it to say that we have found ourselves in a mire, a trap. And these figures I keep on my desk every month since becoming leader of the opposition again. And you know why I keep them? Because there can be no turnaround of Barbados without a turnaround of tourism. Simply put, there can be no turnaround of Barbados. And what do these figures tell me? That in 2003, Barbados had 531,211 long-stay visitors. And in 2012, we had 536,303. In 10 years of your life, given to man is 70. In 1/7 of your life, you have had to contend with a net increase of 5,000. If ever there was a horror story, that is the horror story. And then I said, let me choose one. Let me choose another country in the region. Went near the top, and my mother's born in Aruba. So let me choose Aruba. And in the same period of time, Aruba has moved from 641,906 visitors to 903,000 934 visitors. From 641,000 odd to over 900,000 visitors, an increase of 300,000 when Barbados has increased by 5,000. And then we are told about the international recession. And then we are told about the dampening effects that it has had on people's capacity to travel. And I say to you that life for all of us is about perspective. I can look at that glass in front of the president, and I can choose to look at it as half empty or as half full. I have come here today with a simple message, that I have confidence in the Barbados tourism sector. And because I have confidence in you, and because individually you have aspirations that many of you have shared with me, I believe that this product, this thing that we have, can soar. We have a unique tourism product, and what is it? We have a metropolitan experience in a small tropical island. We have a metropolitan experience in a small tropical island. And I dare say that ours is the perfect example of that. And in that context, I can equally say, with all due deference to my mother, that Aruba is no Barbados. I've spent 3 months there as a child. Aruba is no Barbados. And what Barbados has to offer, we want to hide under a bushel, rather than taking it out and working together as a national purpose to make it just not only our business, but our focus. We have seen the negative effects of a mature product. And what is that? When Grantley Adams started to incentivize and to push for the development of this product, I was not born. But yet, we believe that the creation of the experience as defined in the 1950s ought to be the platform to move forward in the rest of the 21st century. It cannot work. And no amount of tinkering, as we are seeing, in fact we are not seeing, no amount of requests to tinker will allow Barbados to do and to be that which it ought to be and can truly be. We need to rethink our visitor experience, and we need to set about doing it in a way that moves from talk to action. Now I am in the invidious position that I feel like a prisoner. And I feel like a prisoner in my own land because all I can offer you today is talk and hope. Would it that I could offer you action? Would it be such a different story if I could stand here before you and tell you what I intend to do as leader of the Barbados Labour Party if given the opportunity? That there must be new arrangements for how we treat to the sector that literally is at the lifeline of our being as a people. Our fiscal problems in Barbados are combined with high deficits, high debt, and low growth. But there seems to be a failure to recognize that inextricably linked to the task of facilitating growth is the issue of getting tourism right. If we get tourism right, the Pine Hill Dairy and Mr. Cozier will not have to be fighting with the farmers in respect of the milk that they cannot take. If we get tourism right, the other farmers in Barbados providing vegetables and providing meats and chicken, etc., all of a sudden will be squandering, going all over, looking for increased produce to be able to sell. If we get tourism right, taxi drivers will not have to be idly arguing whether Chris Gale do this or do that, and should I do this and should I do that. If we get tourism right, a lot of mothers, one of whom I hire now in my constituency office to clean part-time, would be able to go back up at Bathsheba, and the jewelry that she used to make and sell and earn a living from can support her 4 children, instead of having to ask me to bring her on as the third maid in the office, in an office that is the size, and all who are at that table know how big the office is, smaller than this stage. I am saying to you that Barbados requires a paradigm shift. And that paradigm shift has to accept that it cannot simply be our business. It must be our focus. And as I said, in understanding that, there are some strategic blockages that have to be removed. The notion that because tourism has done well for us, it must continue to be the primary object in the eyes of the taxman, irrespective of the fact that it cannot therefore breathe, has to change. And our focus, because of its linkages, has to be one that sees tourism as the economic lifeblood that provides oxygen to the rest of the body. And that does not mean that you get away without paying anything, but it does mean that there has to be a balance in relation to the review of taxation, particularly the value-added tax, particularly other aspects of input taxes that you face. And we all know the discussions and debates about the bound rates and absence of production, etc. But we have to get it right, because without profitability, we will not get the new investment that is necessary to move us beyond the stage of where we are. But what is the other half of the coin? With the existing room stock, we can do better. And it requires, true, a need to be us to be able to recognize that we have to refurbish and in some instances rebuild. But how do you do that with financially impaired balance sheets as individual corporate entities? That's what you will ask. Nothing short of a national reconstruction fund, to which I spoke in last year's budget, is absolutely necessary. And for the benefit of those who wanted to use it for short-term gain, it is not a case of government taking $500 million US out of a consolidated fund, out of the taxes. It is a case of mobilizing capital from all sources, be it regional, international, private sector, multilateral, merchant banks, but then recognizing that the setting of the cost of capital is the most important criteria and decision that the government will have to make in order to facilitate access to that capital to unflow the reconstruction of our tourism sector across Barbados. And what am I saying? That in many instances, many of you are borrowing at 8 and 9 and 7 and 6 3/4%, but a closer analysis of what you can carry may well be, for the reconstruction of what we have to do, be akin to 4 to 4.5%. And therefore, the only strategic decision for the Minister of Finance and for the government is whether it is prepared to carry the costs as a subsidy of 200 basis points on whatever it mobilizes to ensure that the capital is at an affordable cost to you, that money can be borrowed by you at sums that you can afford to service. And if we were to borrow 500 million US, and if we mobilized it at an average of 6% even, and I believe we can do it at less, not we, the government, but the fund, 2 separate legal entities, as Sir Richard will tell you, not the consolidated fund, not the government of Barbados, but an entity established by statute or in conjunction with existing merchant banks to mobilize a pool of funds for national reconstruction for this sector. If we borrowed 500 million US, and if the average was 6%, and you needed to borrow at 4% as a result of our analysis with you, as that being an affordable development cost that you could carry for the cost of capital, It then costs the government no more than $10 million a year for 15 years to help reposition the Barbados tourism sector. In a budget, I might add, where the government spends $3.5 billion a year in running this country. The glass can be half empty, or the glass can be half full. Tourism can be our business alone, or tourism can be our focus. Equally, we have equally to recognize that there are some other strategic targets that have to be set. The notion that it is appropriate for one of the leading developing countries in the world to continue to talk for more than a decade about new cruise facilities and new pierhead is a nonsense. And who is going to pinch us and say, talk is cheap? No, action is necessary. If we start to reposition cruise, while the hotels may have some anxiety over the years, the truth is that the collective spend that is generated island-wide and the collective awareness that is now absent becomes less of an issue. But the strategic focus and the capacity to deliver has simply been absent for a number of years. I want to thank the Intimate Hotels of Barbados and for facilitating us. Every Thursday we have agreed to go around the country, because the other thing that I did in February was to wipe the hard drive and say I need to listen from scratch. Every nook and cranny, every sector, every part. And every Thursday I take 2 or 3 shadow ministers and we hit the road. And a few Thursdays ago, Renee, I thank you formally again for allowing some of your directors to meet with us. Sue, I thank you for directing us to the categories of small hotels that we would need to go. And we went to Nautilus, we went to Ross Trevor, we went to Pirates Inn, and we had a little mishap with Oceans, and we spoke to them on a conference call. And tomorrow we go. Santia and Kerry and Wilfred will join me. We go into the water service operators tomorrow, because they too have been calling us suffering. But it is only when we hear firsthand, it's only when we hear firsthand from the Intimate Hotels group that they have not had an overseas market presence in Barbados since, for Barbados since 2010, and that they have not received a cent in marketing support since 2011. And then we wonder why tourism is down 6.5% down to the end of May and 20.6% for the first 6 days of June. If you don't put it, you can't take it out. And it is only when we speak to them that we realize that promises of an enhanced small hotel investment fund that ought to be simple and ought to be easy to access, to facilitate in this environment, becomes a notion almost like the coming of Christ. Known about, but no one knows when the day will come. And then we hear that in addition to that, simple things agreed by a cabinet 7, 8, 9 months ago. You heard already enough this morning about lethargy. I don't need to add to that. But when the average time for something to move from cabinet to parliament, from Bay Street to Bridgetown, is now 3 years, as Santi and Cynthia will tell you, everything that we have dealt with in the last few months was agreed to by cabinet 3 years ago for the most part. Then we understand the nature of the problem that faces us. So we are here to work with you. And we believe that there are some allied goals that have to be set. I want to say to you with all sincerity today that it is no sense my showing you the water, taking you to the brook, without being able for you to quench your thirst. I am told that at some point, by some of you, that might happen, and maybe it will. But have equally to give you the confidence that if it happens, what is the environment you will face? And the most important thing I can give you here today is my commitment publicly to be your champion and to be your friend. And I say that because I intend to take direct responsibility in working with the Minister of Tourism and the sector, such that every 2 weeks, the goals which I will outline to you today can be met. And why am I telling you this 3 months after an election when you have 4.5 more years to endure? Because it is important always for you to know what can be, even if it is not. The commitment to meet with the sector every 2 weeks is not to make other sectors jealous, but it's to recognize, as I said earlier, that unless we get tourism right, we cannot get the economic turnaround of Barbados correct. And we have too many people in this country suffering. Too many people in this country who have lost hope. Too many people in this country who cannot. If a man in my constituency wakes up with $10 now on a morning, he feels like a king. And I'm not exaggerating, not even in the least. And therefore, the ability to set the target that is not 5,000 in 10 years, but that must be 1 million land-based tourists by 2020 is what we would have offered you had we been the government today. And 1 million by 2020 has to be not the goal of the tourism sector, but a national goal in which every Barbadian is vested with the responsibility of achieving, and in which your head of government will accept that it is her focus. 1 million by 2020 is not a figure plucked from the air, but it is a figure that recognizes that if simply we were to increase our average occupancy from 60% to 85%, and at the same time mobilize capital to facilitate investment to have another 800 rooms completed by 2017-2018, 1 million by 2020 becomes an absolutely realizable goal. And some who know me may even say you are underreaching compared to what you used to do. But I am being realistic in the current environment, because our greatest challenge is to give you back hope and capacity that you can be the best that you can be. And we will do that. We will give you hope and an unflinching spirit of will, because I know that we are no Aruba. We are better than. And we have it, the collective experience, the collective capital. I'm not going to get into the details of real estate investment trusts and unit trusts and how we will mobilize the capital. Suffice it to say that you know that I know, and you know that I can. But what I will say to you is that what I first have to do is to get the country to accept that they can as well. And before the country can accept that they can, you must accept that you can. And equally, as we set for 1 million by 2020 for land-based tourists, we must do the same for cruise. And I haven't come here to idly pull out these figures. This comes from my interaction with you individually, many of you. But what it means is that that commitment to meet every 2 weeks with the Minister of Tourism, with the requisite structures, and what is more important to you, with the other ministries that now constitute almost independent republics in the view of the BHTA, because you believe that you're dealing with a different country sometimes when trying to get facilitation of things that are outside of the purview of your direct ministry. And that is what leadership is about. That everybody brought to the table working to the same goal and a clear understanding of how we will get there. And if I say X, it must mean X. I'm not talking about votes. It must not be that I say X and then I put it in the back of the pack, because there are those whose heart pains them today to know that we have gone from a test team, test cricket, to intermediate cricket, or that we have gone from the Gold Cup to the G-class maidens in horse racing. That is how people feel. And I feel that those who pioneered in this sector would truly view it as a horror beyond their imagination. But I equally feel that if we were to show them what you have and the target that we have now set as a national target, 1 million by 2020, one that should come out of the lips of every Barbadian, 1 million by 2020, 1 million by 2020. And we mobilize the resources while at the same time understanding the obligation to get our fiscal situation correct. It's not beyond our capacity to get it correct, but we will never get it correct by failing to take decisions. And we will never get it correct by fighting with a very limited group of people instead of mobilizing a country to take down the challenges and to move to the 1 million by 2020. I have every confidence, colleagues, that we can do it. I equally have confidence that Barbados' metropolitan capacity and excellent infrastructural framework allows us to see ourselves as one of the premier hubs for maritime and air transportation in this hemisphere, complementing Miami and Panama, opening the world of Central and Latin America, Europe and Africa, and without a great deal of expenditure on the part of central government. But tourism must not only be our business, it must be our focus for that to happen. I equally believe that we can do good economic things while being decent human beings. And that the notion that our tourism, our visitor experience, should be the most attractive to the differently able populations of the world is one that brings not only returns to you, but allows us to go to church every Sunday knowing that we have done good works for people who cannot do for themselves. And as we try to do it equally in terms of the green economy, we know that we can go to work recognizing that we are making sure that our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren do not live on an island where coastal susceptibility effectively denies them of the quality of life that we have had the benefit of. I know the real day-to-day issues, and I know how easy it is for the Cabinet of Barbados on Thursday to agree that the Barbados National Oil Company shall no longer continue to benefit from $45 to $50 million a year in profits, while you constitute the largest group of non-performing loans, of loans characterized as non-performing by the banking sector in Barbados. And a large part of the reason why you are there is because your high fixed operating costs are beyond your capacity. And your absence of ability to refurbish has meant that your revenue per room cannot be that which it ought otherwise to be. And with a single shareholder in the form of the government of Barbados, or the people of Barbados, as represented by the government, instead of charging Barbados Light and Power world market prices for oil taken out of this ground sent to Trinidad in exchange for fuel oil, we ought to be charging the true cost of production plus no more than a 10% rate of return, because for whom does the benefit go? Why do we believe that we should have an oil company making $50 million in profits that is not equally the catalyst for economic activity for the rest of the society, when we can have our companies keeping their heads above water and talking about expansion in the future and 1 million by 2020 rather than fighting off the undertaker? financially. I say to you, colleagues, that I feel like a prisoner. I really do. Because I know what can and must be done. You know what can and must be done. And it may well be that you feel like prisoners too. But you have to ask yourself, is this good enough? Is this good enough? And can you take 4.5 more years of this? If a man is kicking you in the back and you say nothing, don't expect to complain when the kicks continue. If you know that all that you have asked for has been met with inertia and silence, why would you suddenly expect that to change because there was an election? And the reappointment of the current Minister of Tourism says to me that even though Barbados performed the worst out of the countries recorded by CTO in 2012, that there was a vote of confidence and satisfaction in a feat achieved by no other Minister of Tourism ever in the history of Barbados, by relegating us to the bottom of the pack from the top of the class. And for that extraordinary feat, you have been rewarded with his presence and leadership again. And you must therefore ask yourself, clearly, the government believes that this is as good as it needs to be. Because if after this time, all that can be offered to you is a consultation on the 27th of June, then I ask you today a few questions. Will your bankers on the 28th of June, after more consultation, what will they be telling you in relation to your overdraft and your debts? Will there be more airline seats into Barbados on the 28th of June? Will there be disbursements of funds to the small hotels and the intimate hotels of Barbados on the 28th of June? Will the government find money beyond the pittance of 11 million for our industry, regrettably earning only 1.8 billion now, but had it remained constant to what it was earning at 2.3 billion with the increase of prices, we should have been earning $3.1 billion from tourism last year. And the earnings of 1.8 billion, 550 million less than 2007, represent a catastrophic decline. And most of you would not have been happy, but could live had it remained constant, which would have been 3.1 billion generated into this economy. But what do you get instead? An $11 million program, of which only $3 million is spent in marketing, and $8 million can be disbursed locally if the person happens to find themselves here, rather than an approach that tries to incentivize them to come here in the first place. And if therefore all that we can find is both misguided and minute in comparison to the scale of the problem, then we have to ask ourselves, can you take 4.5 more years of this? Will you see a change on the 28th of June with the appropriate resources applied to the North American and the UK markets? I went to New York 2 weeks ago and met with a number of people, not just people from the diaspora, but people who do business with Barbados. And the constant refrain was, there is no presence of Barbados in the marketplace for the last 18 months. But those in the know say, but how can you have a presence? The officers at the BTA are trying their best. But if you owe $36 million at the end of March this year to all of your creditors, who is going to give you credit to have a presence. So that we have some problems. And for those who are non-tourism people, when I say 1 million by 2020, what does that mean for the fella in Bush Hall? What does that mean for the woman in selling in the market? What does that mean for the people who are taxi drivers? What does that mean for the small shops all about Barbados? It means that we get a base population of 350,000 people per month instead of 270 plus 30 to 40 now, 300, 310 a month. It means that the demand for goods and services throughout Barbados all of a sudden increases exponentially. One of the reasons we want a single market and economy is to remove the constraint of small size and to give us access to a greater market. An improved tourism market does the exact same thing without us having to leave this island. Because the goods and services needed to satisfy 350,000 people per month, the 270 plus the 80,000 a month to give us the million, all of a sudden means that everybody in Barbados is a winner. And when I say to you tourism is at the center of the economic turnaround, then you understand what I mean there. I trust and pray that people will first accept that it is within our grasp. The other key thing about Aruba that struck me is that Aruba has an all-year-round tourism product. The variation between summer and winter is 4%. The variation between summer and winter numbers in Barbados is 25%. When are we going to change it? I believe that meeting every 2 weeks and understanding the clear vertical direction, removing the blockages, and having a champion and a friend will make the defining difference in ensuring that tourism shall not only be our business, but it shall be our focus nationally for each and every Barbadian. And I ask you as I leave you, can you truly sit in limbo for 4.5 years? Ralph opened his hotel last night. I had the honor to be there. I asked a number of people there. And many said to me that they do not believe that there are a number of entities who can survive more than 12 months, and that they fear for what comes in August, September, October. I hope that they are wrong. I truly do. But I also do believe that it is not only politicians who must speak, and it is not only the president of the BHTA and the executive director who must speak. We are a civil people, and long may that last. But if you don't share your experiences with others, then nobody will know the nature of the horror. If you don't let people know what you are facing, you run the risk of being consigned to failure and closure, as the others whose names I will not recite, but with whom you are very familiar, have done in the last few years. I believe that generations will look back, as we look back at 1876 and the 1870s for the development of the sugar industry, the actions by the Chancery Court that led effectively to what became the kernel of Barbados shipping and trading, the 6 companies, what became essentially Barbados Mutual. That was such a period in the economic life of this country. And we can choose to take control of our destiny, or we can choose to be civil and to be on the sidelines as circumstances determine our fate. Those members of the private sector took control of their fate by creating structures that effectively lasted for a century and facilitated economic development in this country for a century. I accept that it is not completely within your capacity so to do, just as I accept that I can only offer to help the intimate hotels of Barbados as I have done, free of cost, and anything I can do to help them because they represent 50 hotels that need help. But ultimately, what is needed is an entire nation with a single focus on what is our business. And I ask you, therefore, to reflect on these things, to decide what is your role in these things. Many will come with promises on the 27th. Many will come with other speeches that I will refer to as cotton candy, pretty to the eye, sweet to the lip, lacking in substance and nutritional value, and in fact leaving you hungrier after you have eaten it. But you will have to ask yourself whether you are old enough to know the difference between food and cotton candy. And if you do know the difference, and if you do believe that you need a champion, and if you do believe that you need a friend, then the Barbados Labour Party and myself stand ready to play that role for you. Thank you, and God bless.